Hi guys, so my name is Ami and the presentation's name is The Hacker's Perspective. I'm from Cybereason. Cybereason is an Israeli cybersecurity startup. The founders of Cybereason came from the Israeli 8200 intelligence unit, which is similar to United States NSA. Cybereason raised about $190 million in funding. 100 million of that was last year from SoftBank, and today we serve hundreds of customers, hundreds of companies, from small companies to large enterprise, and help them face and understand cyber attacks. So today's lecture is a really fun topic. For me it's very fun to talk about the hackers. We're going to talk about the bad guys this time. We're going to understand how they think and how they view your organization. Usually we're the defenders. We have our perspective to defend the base, and I would like to show you how hackers think, and by the end of the presentation I hope you'll understand their mindset, their advantage and their disadvantages, and how you can use those to beat them. So first of all, who are hackers? In our mind we usually have an image of a guy with a hoodie that sits alone in the computer and tries to break into someone else's computer, or a government that employs hundreds of soldiers to break into some organization. So it's not exactly that. Hackers are people, and they do have their own attributes and their own culture. One of those is the need to be cool, need to be a little different, and a little bit against authority. That's part of the way of thinking, how to break systems, how to change systems. So a lot of good hackers are not your classic normal people who work for a government or for an organization, and they would like to do things differently and themselves. They really like fame. We find that in many of the campaigns, the guys behind the attack eventually found their way into the media, and they enjoyed that. Some of them are activists trying to fight for a cause, whether right or wrong. And a lot of these guys today are well-trained military people. Like even the cyber criminals usually will have a very organized place where the hackers work at office hours, 8 a.m. till 5 p.m., maybe some nights, some shifts. We see that from their attack patterns. You can actually see them working during business days and resting during weekends. So it's a bit different from what we usually think. So what's important for hackers? First and foremost is discretion. Do not get caught at all cost. Right? So we, as people who defend, usually tend to see common malware or ransomware that tend to do damage immediately. But hackers, professional ones, take it slow. They need to be as far away as possible from being detected. Because when they're detected, there can be attribution, and attribution has consequences, real life world consequences. So the first and foremost, they need to be in the shadows. How do they do that? First of all, they know how to hide in the noise. This is something we will talk about later, but they know how not to pick their head and be seen immediately. They know how to throw us off, how to throw misdirection, use some tools to make the security organization think there's something wrong elsewhere. And they know that there is always a way into the organization. So they never stop. They try again and again and again, as long as they have the motive. If they failed once, they will try in a different way. They are very, very perseverant. And the most important thing to know, that hackers lean to the path of least resistance. Hackers try to take it easy. Why? First of all, hacking is a very expensive operation. It may cost millions of dollars to hack into an organization. You need to develop tools. You need to have an operation, people working day and night to maintain the foothold, to extend. So to minimize cost, we see the usage of existing tools, the same tools that pen testers would use or other people would download from the internet, can be used maliciously. They will almost never develop their own tool from scratch. This is something that is kept for very, very high-profile targets. They will use existing vulnerabilities before using 0 days. Yes, 0 days are dangerous. 0 days are very, very nice to talk about. Most of the time, 0 days will be kept for very, very important assets. Once you use a 0 day, you expose yourself. You've used it. It's a one-time card usually. They will try to do simple things like use of leaked passwords that they got online from some leakage campaign. They will test at home their attack against what they know of the organization. If they know which type of firewall your organization used, they will simulate that. They will try to do it as quickly as possible and as cheaply as possible, but they will try to see if that will work or not. And second thing is hackers need to attack many organizations to get enough revenue back. It's not enough to attack one target. Almost in any case where the attacker has spent money developing a campaign, they will try for multiple targets. This means that every time they go inside, they will maximize their impact. They will try to steal money by sending phishing emails. They will try to get information. They will try to delete files and send ransom notes. They will do everything once inside. They will establish a persistent hold so they can come back. If they don't find anything now, maybe they'll come back in a month without having to go all the way through all the defenses when they have the foothold, when they have the back door in there. And lastly, they will deploy botnets. They will use the organization's computer against it to attack other organizations or the organization itself. So this is something we've seen. These patterns have been seen for many years. It makes sense. Organizations have lots of valuable assets, and the hackers have one valuable asset, which is time. They can try again and again and again and again. And today the knowledge is very open on the internet, and becoming an entry-level hacker is quite easy. Okay, so how does a hacking operation even works? Like, okay, we've seen that in movies, guys in front of a screen. No, okay, let's look exactly how a real operation works. So many of the successful operations look like a military expedition. Gather intelligence, build tools customized for that attack, decide where you want to get in, do the intrusion, and then try many, many different ways to get inside. Usually the first way will not work. You'll send a phishing email and you'll see no one clicked. Then you'll go and refine your intelligence, find better emails, better language, better links. At some point someone will click. At some point you will find a vulnerability. Again and again and again, persistence. Once we've started seeing penetration into an organization, the attackers will change teams usually. If it's a large organization, we'll have specific teams for intrusion. This is like if you've seen like how a SWAT team looks like in the police, like a special unit from the police. They have the intrusion team, right? The guy with a big hammer that opens the door. So for hacking operations, I'm not joking, in large organizations, they have an intrusion team, usually, that will use intrusion tools that they are very well trained of and do it as quickly as possible. That usually means to go very low and very slow, as much as needed, not to get discovered, because this is the most sensitive point in the hacker's mind. They will force to establish a foothold, meaning they will find a computer to get onto in the organization. That's a foothold. And they will keep it. They will defend it. And in many cases, they will check themselves to see if they're being discovered, And if they are discovered, they will cause noise. What is noise? Blue screening a machine, rebooting machines at random, causing the printer to stop. The way to pull the IT organization to handle different contingencies and not look for the attacker. We've seen that in many famous attacks where the attacker just spent a lot of time creating noise in the organization and problems, so their attack goes silently. And lastly, once they have a foothold and they see that it is safe and clear, they will move to different endpoints. It's important to understand that the attacker will not land at the most important asset. They will land wherever they can. Whoever clicked that link, whoever downloaded that tool, whoever had a vulnerable operating system. From there they need to advance, right? They need to move until they get to the important assets. So this takes time, and in that time they gather intelligence on the organization itself. Sometimes some attacker will have a network map and an organizational map, just as you'd have your directory. They will have the same there. They will understand who is the CEO, who is the finance officer, who has the money and who can send it out. How do we think of security? Okay, we're in an organization, we're protecting ourselves, right? So what do? We create layers. We have critical assets. We'll do some data security on top of it, endpoint security, application security, network perimeter security. We say, okay, the attacker will go at our front door. They will have to go through many, many, many layers before getting to the actual valuable data, right? Makes sense. We have the perimeter. It has an outside world, noisy and dirty, and we have the inside organization, which is clean, no problems. How do we think an attacker will come? It will come at the perimeter. We'll try to breach the perimeter if they can. If they breach our perimeter tools, they will have to face the network security tools, etc., etc. Attackers don't see defenses like that. Attackers do not try at the perimeter. They will try to bypass as many layers as possible in one shot. For example, if they see access to an internal application, they just bypassed 3 layers, they will try to attack the application layer, right? The third layer. They won't go at the IP address and try to whatever. You open the port for the application. Let's say you have a web server or web shop. It's already open. I don't need to go through the network layer and the perimeter. I just need to attack that application. Once I'm there, I can continue. I've skipped 2 layers, right? A different approach would be to send a phishing email and have the organization inside contact me, right? Reverse the direction. Instead of attacking from outside inwards, phishing and other exploits cause the organization from itself to go outside. Most of the times we monitor communication from outside into the organization. We need to understand that we need to monitor the other direction just as well, the behavior and the communication. Once I am in, I want remote access. I want remote desktop. I want remote shell. The attacker wants to be able to be flexible. They want to move around. They will not stay at a place where they're restricted. They will need to find an interactive way to continue. We've seen that in many, many attacks. Attackers will start with a tool, but almost immediately they will move to human behind the computer that will type commands. There is someone literally behind your shoulder, watching at everything you do, learning, studying, and doing the same. That's how attackers think. That's the way they do it. They will not just deploy a malware and go away. It never happens. The second phase is always interactive because they don't know where they landed and they need to be silent and work slowly, and an automated tool will make a lot of noise. The second thing that is most important to a hacker is credentials, your passwords. If they can steal your password, great, maybe you have access to other systems. If they can steal local administrator password, great, maybe that local administrator has access to other systems. If they can leak credentials outside, they can get money out of it immediately. So they will try to bypass as many mechanisms against credentials, against credential theft, and will spend a lot of time getting those credentials. Lateral movement, or the movement from one PC to a server, or from one machine to a different machine, is a critical step. It cannot be avoided. It's the most important step for them to increase their foothold and get to those critical assets they want. So, when we defend, we usually defend against attacks that will challenge our network security and our operational security. Most of the times, the attack will go after the application, meaning our websites, our online shops, our online services. This is the easiest way to find vulnerabilities. Usually, we will use some third-party tool to create our website. That tool will usually have open vulnerabilities on the internet. Once I'm there, I'm already on your server. So instead of attacking the network and the operating system, which is so complicated, they will go for the application first, and only then they will go to the computers in the organization. So these are numbers that they're from our experience of hundreds of attacks, and they're based also on known information on the internet. So how do hackers prefer to enter the organization? What is the best entry point in the eye of a hacker? So first of all, of course, if I have a username and password of someone with privileges, I'll use that. And these username and passwords leak. And if they're not changed repetitively, they can be used later. Maybe one attacker group got it, they sent it to a different attacker group. Maybe it's online. Changing passwords quickly is something that most organizations forget to do or don't enforce. Second, access to an email account is great for a hacker, right? They can send phishing emails from an authorized email address to other people in the organization. This is much more trustworthy than sending an email from outside. So if they have access to an email account, which is not that difficult to get because most of us use webmails and not restricted to emails that are on property, they can start sending their phishing email and their attack emails from that email address. Thirdly would be just plain access to an endpoint. If they have physical access to the endpoint, they'll use that. And you will not believe how easy that is at some occasions. All the rest, access to the network, servers, way, way, way down below. Look, it's like less than a third of the topmost. So these are the three topmost ways of hackers to get into your organization. And if you get that, you understand that what needs to be protected is sometimes different. What can stop a hacker? What is the best way to stop a hacker today? So 2018, these are the statistics. Of course, this change every year, but right now, really simple. First of all, first and foremost, two-factor authentication. Google said it, we'll say it again. Two-factor authentication. This stops a lot of the attacks. If you do two-factor authentication on your mail, even if someone got password to your mail, it will be difficult for them to attack. So you're protecting the entry point by protecting your credentials. Credentials today are the most important asset. Second is encryption. This is a little bit more complicated issue, but when you're not using SSL to access your assets, and if you're not using encryption in your organization, if someone somehow got access to the network layer, if you're browsing from an internet cafe or you just logged into a compromised Wi-Fi network, you're exposing everything. And even today in 2018, many systems don't use SSL by default for authentication. So these are the two things to remember. Two-factor authentication, encryption. These two will stop 2/3 of the attack. So what are we paying money for and what are we protecting? So these numbers again are from what we see. Everybody has an antivirus. It's pretty easy to bypass it. Everybody has a firewall. Pretty easy to bypass it. IPS, not so much deployed, not so much monitored, not that easy to bypass. All the rest are very difficult to bypass today because the attackers will not spend that much time to investigate that. Antiviruses and firewall are easy. I can download an antivirus if I know what the antivirus vendor you're using. I'll check. If I'll try to bypass by changing my code, whatever, that's it, I'm bypassed. I don't need to investigate further. An IPS is a bit more different, right? Or other behavioral systems are much more difficult to bypass. So, to summarize, first, what are hackers worried about, right? We're worried that we're going to get attacked, right? They're worried that you're going to use two-factor authentication, that you're going to keep your OSs patched, because a fully patched OS is very difficult to breach. Even if you've got a low-level user, it's difficult to get to a system or a super user. A non-patched system is really easy to get, a super user. Encryption is really problematic for attacker. They need to spend a lot of resources to break encryption. So now for the active part. First of all, now that you know what a hacker is worried about and how he thinks, you need to know 3 things this year to know how to combat them. First, hackers use vulnerability scanners a lot. You should use that too. Hackers are penetrators and they use pen testing tools. They use penetration testing tools. That's the first tools they'll use. They'll download PowerShell Empire and use it. They'll download Mimikatz and use it. Use it too. Test your system. Train. If you don't know how to, ask someone who can. Do an exercise. See how it will look like. Third, check the internet for leaks. Do not be afraid of that. Try to see if any of your organizational information was leaked. If passwords were leaked, replace passwords. Have a good password policy to replace password every now and then. It's really important. This will make the attacker, this will deter attackers. From my perspective, the way to employ these tools as efficiently as possible is first of all to do what we call active hunting. Meaning is not waiting for the attack. Look for it. Look for traces. Look for common things. Look for non-common things. Try to see if any initial breach happened. Attacks are long and complicated and the initial phase of the attack is fragile. It is easy to disrupt it. Once the attacker is inside and gained foothold, that's much more complicated to root out. Active hunting. Do efficient hunting on your own organization is the most efficient tool in our experience to find attackers in their initial phase, attacks in their initial phase. You'll find an attack within a few hours or a day instead of weeks or months. Second of all, counterintelligence. You're living in Korea, your business is here. Who are the most prominent attack groups in Korea? Check. What are they after? Are they after government, manufacturing, insurance? What are common attacks? Get a debrief. You don't need to know all the details, but try to understand where you live. Closing your eyes, closing our eyes does not help. We need to know that there are threats and we need to know that these threats are real. And we know that we do not want these threats at our front door. And train your people for that. If this year was, banking Trojans, okay, let's train against banking Trojans. Explain people what they are. Explain people what is phishing email. Again and again and again and again. If you have the right people and the right approach, do deception and honeypotting. Deploy some deception points in your organization and monitor those. Monitoring all the assets of the organization can be a little difficult without the right tools, but deploying a honeypot that looks good and monitoring that may be easier for you. Lastly, it's very important to disrupt an operation once it's started. The first phase of an attack is the most fragile way, and it will deter the attacker for weeks or months, and sometimes forever. Like, stop them before they get to the critical mission assets, and do not wait. Do not hide the fact that you had an attack. Use the tools, do an incident response, react responsively inside the organization, understand what it means, understand what the implications are, so you can stop it. If you react quickly, attack will stop, I promise you. You will wear them off, and if they're persistent, you'll have to try again, but you will win. We believe in visibility, in the ability to look into the organization and see everything. Use tools like EDR that can give you visibility to your organization in routine and when an attack happens. So when it happens, you can react quickly. You know where the attacker is. You know what the extent of the damage that happened already. Then now let's wear them off. Nothing happened. It didn't reach to our critical assets. No information was leaked, etc., etc. Thank you. I hope.
네, 이제 Q&A 시간이 바로 이어지도록 하겠습니다. 여러분들께서 질문해 주신 SNS 질문 화면을 통해서 한번 보도록 하겠습니다. 그리고 베스트 퀘스천을 해주신 분 한 분을 선정해서 지금 제가 들고 있는 블루투스 키보드와 마우스 세트 한 분을 선정해서 이 자리에서 드리도록 하겠습니다. 네, 임형성님께서 질문하신 내용 답변 부탁드리겠습니다.
Okay, so the question is, what is the most important thing that an organization have to protect against an attack? So the first and foremost important thing is to prepare to an attack routinely and to protect the credentials and the ability to use these credentials for other assets. So today you can start by deploying two-factor authentication and checking your encryption. That's something you can do almost for free. Almost every system allows 2FA today, and encryption is enabled on all of web services, something that you can just do now. Preparing for an attack usually means to use a tool that can increase your visibility, and then and only then you can understand what you want to protect. Every organization is different, right? In my organization, I would like to protect the code, maybe, or the IP. In some companies, I would need to protect the ability to send bank transfers. So first you need to study your organization, use a tool for that, use a company for that, and from there on you'll know what you need to protect.
네, 두 번째 뒷분들이 좀 안 보이실 것 같아서 제가 읽어보도록 하겠습니다. 한국에서 발생했던 해커에 의한 공격은 주로 북한에 의한 정치적인 목적에 의한 활동인 것 같습니다. 기업을 대상으로 긍정적인 목적으로 시도된 해킹 사건이 한국에는 없었던 것 같은데요. 그런 면에서 한국의 기업은 상대적으로 해커의 공격으로부터 안전하다고 볼 수 있는데요. 의견을 듣고 싶습니다. 하셨는데
So
네.
efficient attackers make money. That's their motive. First of all, to fund the campaign, because this is usually not a legal campaign. Doesn't matter who runs it. So they need money. And second of all, money makes these things effective. So we've seen attacks that were aiming for disruption and not money, but I think 90% of the attacks we've seen were after money, globally. Not always we know who attacked. Sometimes you'll think it's one country, but sometimes it will be something completely different. It's really difficult to do attribution. Really, really difficult. The internet, nobody knows who you are. So some organization will say there's someone else. It's very easy to point the finger, but eventually we see money stolen. It really is the most common criteria for all attacks, is that eventually money got stolen, and a lot of money, much more than you know from the media. Organizations do not tell, they don't like to tell how much they paid. But think about it. If there was no money, there were no attacks. People are paying a lot of money for attackers.
네, SNS 질문 여기까지 받도록 하겠고요. 혹시 현장 질문 있으신 분은 네, 손을 들어주시면 네, 답변을 해드리도록 하겠습니다. 혹시 질문 있으신가요? 손을 들어주시기 바랍니다. 네, 아까 말씀드렸던 것처럼 베스트 퀘스천을 해주신 분께는 한 분을 선정해서 키보드 마우스 세트를 네, 이 자리에서 증정해드리도록 하겠습니다.
Okay, one comment that I got, that I mentioned EDR, and maybe not everybody knows what EDR is. So in the schematics I showed earlier, I showed layered of defense. So an attacker will always try to get to an endpoint. That's where the data is, that's where the credentials are, that's where an attacker can do actions, right? Attacker cannot perform actions from the network. They need to be on a machine, they need to type. So an EDR is an endpoint detection and response. That's a term. It is something, it's mostly a product and a service that has several vendors in that field, where a sensor is installed on the machine. That sensor picks up telemetry or data, information, and analyzes the data, sends it to an analysis server, and that server does few things. First of all, it allows you to see what happens on the endpoint, not what the user is typing, but all the metadata, which processors were, which files were used, which domains were accessed, by which processors. Allows you to ask questions and do automated detection, meaning if there's a behavior, is that behavior malicious or benign? Is that file malicious or benign? So the EDR is both for investigation and proactive hunting, and for automated hunting to get those hackers, those attacks, when they land on the endpoint. So it's a visibility tool, a detection tool, and a response tool.
네, 그럼 질문이 없으신 걸로 알고 네, 이것으로 종료를 하도록 하겠고요. 지금 이